I want less equality in the workforce.
Do we need men in society?
This whole idea of like, we need equality in the workforce. Find me a woman who wants to go on an oil rig. I do not want to see women doing jobs like that. What you have is this generation of women who do not want to be challenged or convicted in any way about their parenting, about their role as a wife. Why are millennial women so sensitive? They do not want to be exposed to any other idea that might be different, because to them, they start to think, well, then this must mean I'm not good enough. And this is the scariest part. It never goes away. The Bible tells us that it is actually not biblical to remarry, and that you are actively living in sin and committing adultery if you remarry after divorce.
Welcome back to the I Wish You Knew podcast. I'm your host, Adam Lane Smith, the attachment specialist. With me, as always, is my co-host, Andrey Korikov. Andrey, nice hair.
Adam.
And with us today is Alex Clark. She's a host of the Spillover podcast and Turning Point USA contributor. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good to have you.
Now today, the reason we brought Alex on to a podcast talking about relationships is in this modern world, social media, propaganda, all kinds of messaging flies around. And I have seen a lot of couples that I work with get torn apart by all this weird messaging out there, all the different things that they hear, then they can't even agree on the basic facts, and they start falling apart because their Instagram feeds are different, or they hear different things on their different media sites. And I would love to have you, an expert in all of this, someone who's been doing this for a long time, come in and talk to us a little bit about what you have seen in that field, what it might mean for the people at home, all that good stuff.
Well, it's interesting. My audience is mostly millennial women, 25 to 35. They are newly married. They are maybe on their second child on average. They are a little above average income, household income. But one thing is, they struggle so much with comparison on social media. I hear it all day, every day. And ironically, I get blamed for a lot of that because I bring up a lot of subject matter, and they feel personally attacked because it's a way of life that isn't their way of life. And I've been working a lot with my audience on that hearing that somebody lives their life differently than you doesn't mean that what you're doing is wrong or that you're guilty of something. It's just a different perspective, and you can listen to that and you can take something from that, or you can leave it. But there is this overgrowing sense of emotionality and sensitivity that I'm noticing with millennial women, especially, where everything just feels like a personal attack.
Now, isn't this fascinating? Because so many of the things that you, I'm not going to say like teach, you're not academically out there saying you must live this way, but so many of the things that you advocate for, even just say could be useful. It sounds like it resonates a lot with millennial men in that age group, right? So a lot of millennial men are going to hear your message and say, yeah, I love this. This is good. But if the women are hearing it and actively hating it, they're actually hearing the same message and rejecting that. And it doesn't sound like they'd even be able to have a relationship if the same information is making them angry.
But it's a question of who is actually giving you the message, because if you're speaking to men, they probably project some form of desire onto you and say, oh, I'd love to, meet a girl like that with the same views. For a woman, you instantly become competition, right? And the thing is, everybody is comparing themselves online now because of what? Because of the habits we've built in the last 15, 20 years. And you've seen that develop as a therapist. What is the cause of that disconnect where a man can look at a camera and see you in your podcast and say, she's perfect, I want to be like her. And then a woman sees the same thing and she goes, I hate this because it makes me feel insecure. Is this an attachment issue, Adam, or what is this?
I will say this, is when women have attachment issues, they have a very hard time connecting to other women in friendship or in any way because they feel like every other woman, either if she's insecurely attached, every other woman is better than her. And if another man sees that, they're going to see how worthless she is on the inside. So yes, you would be a threat. And if they're avoidantly attached, then they think every woman is out there like a predator, waiting to scoop up whatever they can hopefully find in this world. So yes, you would be a threat. So I'd say of the 50% of estimated women with attachment issues, that might be who you're seeing.
So here's my theory. And I'm not the first person to come up with this, but Michael Easter is a guy who wrote this book called The Comfort Crisis. And he talked about how people are too comfortable with not being uncomfortable. And what you have is this generation of women who do not want to be challenged or convicted in any way about their parenting, about their role as a wife, about motherhood. They do not want to be exposed to any other idea that might be different because to them, they start to think, well, then this must mean I'm not good enough. It's like we're incapable of feeling conviction. And the thing is that the overwhelming feeling they get is shame. But what I've learned through interviewing various experts on the spillover is that shame can be used as a tool for good. Shame is a good thing because when you feel shame, you can sense something is not right. Now, what do I need to fix to address this problem, this feeling of unease, this uncomfortable thing that I'm experiencing? And then you are able to take a step back and look at everything. If you don't feel any shame or any guilt, then how will you ever grow or change? And so the other thing that I try to work with my audience on is that I'm not the one telling you as a non-parent, because a lot of the episodes, if you're unfamiliar with my show, do have to do with parenting and things like that. I am not the one giving the expertise. I'm not the expert. I've never said I was. But my guests are. And so I'm inviting them on to be the expert to give them this information. I am the middleman. I'm just hosting these conversations and I'm asking the hard questions so that my audience can learn something. But what's interesting is that after 2 or 3 months like clockwork, the same women that DM me and say, how dare you, this episode was mom shaming me, they will message me and say, I just want to apologize. I took time to reflect, step back, not be so emotional, not be so reactionary as women are. And I realized that your guest was right. You were right facilitating this conversation. And now I have completely changed my life, or I changed my parenting, or I did a 180. I went from full-time career to part-time. I've downsized my house so I can stay home with my kids. I wouldn't have done that if I didn't feel convicted from your conversation.
Sure, but that's trust, right? So very commonly, women will start by testing the boundaries, especially with men, and now even growing more so with other women, and they will just attack with everything they got to see if you will change, that if you're consistent, if you're going to continue. And then when they have that first fear response, that anger response calm down, and they can start processing, that you feel a little bit safer. You feel a little bit safer to them because they're so used to being able to push people over. There's two parts to that. I'm curious what you think about this, Adam, but I think that the first part is the fact that children are being coddled, and they're being coddled a lot more, and there's a very fast response to discomfort. As soon as there's tears, there has to be reconciliation. It shouldn't work like that. And number two, we're also training men to be the same thing. Very delicate, very sensitive, hypersensitive, hyper anxious, and as soon as there is any sign of displeasure, they have to act. Now, if you're the only one who doesn't act and somebody shows displeasure to you, what are you demonstrating? Is that secure attachment if it's based on principles, or what is that, Adam?
No, so there's, and I love what you just said. There's two ways that this intersects with how you connect to other people. One is, yes, children are being over-coddled, and we're being encouraged to be more comfortable than ever. Part of that is when we don't have healthy relationships, we don't get the biochemistry that makes us resilient to stress. So the small amounts of stress that we might otherwise feel, like, oh, I heard something on a podcast that didn't make me very happy, it feels 5 times more painful to somebody who doesn't have the right biochemistry in their brain. So they're freaking out over what feels like a stab wound. How dare Alex bring this person into my home and have them insult me in my kitchen? I thought I could trust her. And then they come through that process, like Andrey talked about, and they realize that they can still trust you.
You know what's really juicy? When I thought about this, I was like, why are millennial women so sensitive? Who raised millennial women? Gen X. Gen X was what? The latchkey generation who were home raising themselves because they had divorced parents likely. They had 2 working parents outside of the home. They were alone a lot. This was a neglected generation who then was raising kids, millennials, and now millennials are overly sensitive, take everything as a personal attack. Could there be some sort of relation there to being raised by Gen X?
Yes, Gen X, and I'm just on the edge of Gen X and millennial myself. Gen X has some of the lowest observable oxytocin, where they don't feel connected to others because they never really did. So then they tries to raise kids, but they didn't know how to give them that affection and warmth. They tried to give them, functionality or pleasure, or here's some video games. Here's how to be happy. Here, watch some cartoons. But it wasn't, here's how to build a substantial relationship and be resilient and be strong. It was, here's some of the fun that I didn't get to have as a kid. So yeah, now we have these generations of women and men who don't know how to be strong, but they also feel so insecure. And that's what you're seeing, 100%.
But there's also no objective truth for people to cluster around. No. Because before, what used to happen is that this is the one truth in society, this is the religion we follow, this is the policy that we have, and people would start building themselves emotionally around something that's stable. Mm-hmm. Now, everything is for question, especially with the online digital space. Everything's always under attack, nothing is ever true, and everything spikes emotion because digital media is built to create that addictive, animalistic response. And we know this, we're all digital media professionals. We know we have to create clippable content, things that are so viral that you can't look away. However, by consequence, you're always pushing somebody over the edge into the unstable states. Mm-hmm. They will eventually learn to live in that state, and that's going to be normal. And I'm sure, as somebody who's in the dating space, have you noticed that's also the same effect in dating, where people are unstable and they tend to respond to stress differently?
What are you seeing in men now? Because I don't date men, and neither does Andrey. So, what are you seeing in men?
So what I'm seeing when it comes to dating right now is men really uncomfortable with commitment. Ooh. Very, very afraid of commitment. There is always in my experience, there is always some excuse of why they can't take the relationship to the next level. And it's always like, well, I need to be making a certain amount of money before I get married. I have to get this promotion before I can think about getting married. All of these things. Whereas in generations past, the idea of marriage was you combine with somebody, they're your partner to grow with. You're getting through those hard things, hardships financially, not having the best job in the world, not living the best place in the world. You don't have the biggest house in the world. You don't need those things to be able to get married and have a family. And yet we are waiting on these weird arbitrary milestones that we allegedly have to reach before we can get married and have kids. And what's really frustrating is that you have men who claim they have to hit these different things before they can get married, but then they're also saying that there's no good women that want to get married and have kids. But then they do you see what I'm saying? They have these excuses why they can't get married, but then they blame the women when I'm like, the thing is that I have my audience, those of us who aren't married yet, we all want to be. We all want to be in my audience.
So if you had to list like 3 or 4 things you're really looking for in a man, what are those?
Okay.
I love that because I get that question all the time. Adam, what are women looking for? And I tell them exactly, and they say, well, I don't think that's what women are looking for. So what are you looking for?
I'm looking for Christian, conservative, and my third, which is the fun thing. So like those are like the 2 core things that I want. And then my extra would be extremely, really way more extroverted than me and extremely goofy, silly. Like weird, but not socially awkward weird, like a very weird sense of humor. I always describe it as like SpongeBob sense of humor, which you're not going to understand if you're not a millennial, but that would be my type of guy. Got it. I think that I'm a good combination of introverted, extroverted, and I like being around a guy who is more life of the party, extroverted. I want him to be the one to say, like, let's invite people over, because I won't. I will say, let's stay in every weekend. I need somebody that's going to push me a little bit in that way and that I can rely on to have, make the rounds at a party or a business meeting and talk to everybody that needs to be spoken to.
What does that make you feel as a woman if a man is like that? Safe or happy or what?
Yeah, I think safe, more relaxed. He's got it under control. I don't like the idea of having to babysit a man.
Right.
I have been in that situation where I'm dating men where I feel like I have to check in on them at a social function. Like, you doing okay? Because I can't talk to anybody. You know what I mean? That's so unattractive. Nothing about that is masculine.
So you brought up an interesting idea around fun, right? So part of the thing is having somebody who's really fun and helps you kind of step out of that space of responsibility. How do you differentiate somebody you can actually have fun with versus somebody who has to entertain you? It's a very common issue that men have. They say, why am I supposed to be the one who sits there and entertains you?
It's not entertaining. There's people that you click with and have chemistry with that you could do nothing all day. You could literally be folding laundry next to each other, but it's fun.
Right.
You never run out of things to talk about. The chemistry is always there. The spark is always there. Whether we're watching a movie, we're going to the post office, or we're going out, to a friend's birthday dinner. There's always. It's just fun being around them. It's not draining.
It's like a soulmate. Is there such a thing as a soulmate?
Don't ever say soulmate again.
Why?
No.
I've been radicalized on the soulmate issue.
No.
I've recently been radicalized. I'm not convinced that everybody is a soulmate anymore. And for the longest time, I did think that.
Oh, come on, team soulmate here.
Wait a minute. Have either of you ever met a person who talks honestly about soulmates, who wasn't wildly chaotic, didn't have 15 soulmates in the course of their life? You know what I mean? No, soulmates is I am flooded with chemicals right up front and I haven't actually thought about the future. Soulmates, no. Now, what I will say is this. What was I going to say?
He feels very strongly about this issue.
That threw me way off. The soulmates, please don't ever. I will throw this at you.
Having fun.
Yes. What you're talking about is the difference between men who think they have to be interesting and stimulating and flood you with entertainment in the same way that they have to compete with Netflix, they have to compete with Amazon, they have to compete with every social media.
That's just ridiculously immature. If that's what they believe a woman means when she's like, I want somebody fun, then that's just they have no understanding in my idea of 100%. Relationships.
But think about this. So if that's what they're doing, it's a different brain chemical, right? That's the addictive dopamine brain chemical, sugar, porn, everything is over here. But the depth of human connection, it really comes down to the neurotransmitter serotonin more, which is, if this is sugar, dopamine is sugar, I'm going to eat a candy bar, then serotonin is I'm going to sit and enjoy steak and potatoes for my brain. It's going to really flood me, and you never get tired of it. So all the experiences you talked about, going to the post office, going grocery shopping, having a conversation, going to a friend's birthday party, those aren't wild sugar dopamine and sugar rushes kind of moments. Those are serotonin moments. That's what men, I think, are missing, is they think they have to dance for your amusement, but you just want them to be present with you.
So I had a serious relationship a couple years ago. In the first couple months, this guy took me to New York City on a helicopter ride. Every fancy restaurant you could think of, concerts, all of these fun things. After a couple months, when it became real life, because most people do not have the financial means to keep that ruse up for long term. Once all of that died down and it was real life, that's when the fighting began. Unless we were doing some sort of activity like that to distract us, we couldn't just sit with each other. That was a very, very toxic relationship, and the signs were there that this wasn't going to last long term because we were incapable of just being. One of my most recent relationships, that was the part that we did have very well, was that we just enjoyed being around each other, even if we weren't talking.
How did you set that relationship up different at the beginning? Instead of being flown out to New York and helicopters, what was different about the setup in that relationship? What did you guys talk about that was different?
There was just a personality difference, I think, between the two men, because the second one was way more, almost too, and this is what ended up causing problems, too lax, too chill. was too okay with just sitting and doing nothing and not taking initiative. So the biggest problem and what led to that relationship ending was everything's going great. Well, we don't need to get married anytime soon, even though I'm 31. What do you mean? We're doing fine. Like, I'm happy, you're happy. Like, we're just chilling. I'm like, we're not chilling once we're in our 30s.
Time is running by.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's frustrating because you get into this point as a woman where in your early 30s, you have to talk about the timeline because it is real. But if you do talk about the timeline, then you're nagging and you're rushing and you're putting pressure on. But if I don't talk about it and they're not bringing it up, then it's like, what are we doing? Like, you know what I mean? I'm either way, I lose as a woman dating in my 30s who wants to get married. If I don't bring it up, I'm damned. And if I do bring it up, I'm damned. Because they don't want to hear about how, so like, I'm not interested in dating for longer than a year without knowing we definitely are getting engaged. They're like, well, you're putting pressure on me.
Yeah, but then what's so wrong about putting pressure on somebody? I don't understand this part about men specifically. It's like you take a responsibility for somebody and you say, look, we're going to date. We're going to have a relationship and it is something that I'm interested in. And then you have no plan? Like in your own mind, you wake up in the morning and you just go, well, today is a great day. I have no idea where this is going. I have no idea why I'm spending time with you. I have no idea why I'm investing, my emotional resources, my energy, my money into you, because I have no plan. I'm like, sorry guys, that's bullshit, right? So this is the part where you can call it out and say, look, I don't believe you don't have a plan. Otherwise you wouldn't be here. Men don't work like that. Men do not work on not having a plan. And that whole thing of, don't put pressure on me. It's like, it's also testing boundaries, right? To see if this is really that important to you. You got to understand, men test a lot of boundaries. We do it differently. We do not do it in the same way as women do. I notice myself testing boundaries with everybody, and that is to see, what do you really care about? Because I'm so used to people telling me things they claim to care about, women especially, and that's not the case. So as a woman, is it possible, do you think, to just push through and say, look, I need a plan, and you better have a plan or you're not a man?
I feel like I'm always really fair with saying in the very beginning, I am dating for marriage. I'm really not interested in just dating for longer than a year and a half tops, without having a conversation of we know we're getting engaged. Like, in my view, I do not think it's crazy at my age. Now, if you're 18, maybe, but in your 30s, late 20s, early 30s, I think it is totally fair to expect a guy to know, would I want to marry this girl within 6 months?
Well, I would agree, because here's the thing. You're also working against a biological clock, and there's a lot of guys who are very stupid about this. It's like, look, sure, why don't you wait until you're in your 40s? You have 10 years of fun, and then what? You want to go through pregnancy issues, you want to go through the miscarriages, you want to have a heightened risk of birth defects, and then live with that decision for the rest of your life? Like, don't be stupid.
Do you like men with beards?
Actually, love men with beards. That is my type. So my type is, if I had to choose and I could create my ideal man physically, he would be dark brunette, dark eyes, beard.
Scratchy beard or soft, luxurious beard?
Soft, luxurious, of course.
Does any woman love a man with a scratchy beard, or does it have to be soft?
No, because then every makeout session ends with beard burn.
The wonderful thing about Rugged Legacy Grooming Supplies is that it turns your beard from scratchy into soft. I have a wife and 3 daughters, and they love my beard with Rugged Legacy in it.
And here's the big thing. It's not just men who have this mental block when it comes to a woman's biological clock. The women do too. And it all stems from the fertility industry. And this is something I've brought up a lot on the spillover. I think that the fertility industry is one of the most evil industries in history.
Well, they harvest your eggs. Like, that can't be good.
Well, the problem is they have a vested interest in feminism, telling women, which now we have a generation of men who don't know that they've fallen for this feminist lie, but they have. That's why they don't think about biological clock or think it's no big deal. They tell women that your 20s are for your career. You need to build your career. But the fertility industry is here with open arms to help you have a baby in your late 30s, early 40s. Timeline is a thing of the past. There's no biological clock. We're always here for you. You can have a family on your own terms. This is an evil, demonic lie, because it is not true that you are guaranteed to be able to have a child through IVF, surrogacy, any of these means, it's not guaranteed. They will take $20,000, $30,000 from you easy before being like, yeah, I guess this isn't going to work because you believe this lie that you could just have a baby whenever you wanted to. And so you waited till you were 38 on purpose because you thought, well, I have to build my career first. And so the men, I mean, we've got an entire generation now who they don't think about it in the way that women do. They're just like, oh yeah, well, people have families whenever. And like, I mean, I know that there is such a thing as IVF or whatever. Like, I'm not worried about it. They don't even think about it.
They don't research it. They don't look into it. They don't understand what it is, right? But here's also another component to this that both men and women need to understand. Not only do you have a biological timeline, but you also have a relationship timeline. And what you brought up at the very beginning in terms of the conversation about your crazy, fun relationship that fizzled out is that your relationships can go either up in terms of the quality and experience or down. If they stay the same, like that's dead in the water, that's just boring and mundane, you leave. Most relationships start by having too much fun. And then, the reality settles in and they, by the end of their 60s, 70s, they hate each other. Just the loathing that sits in them is so deep. Instead, why aren't people doing it the other way? To start with something that's less fun and add things so that you can always be building that relationship with your partner. Kids are that. Marriages are that. Businesses are that. You're not supposed to go here to here. You're supposed to actually go from the ground level and then add more and more context. People don't understand that because people don't talk about it because they've never seen that in their relationships. I know a lot of people with divorced parents and all they've seen is the relationships always go down. Marriages always suck. And if you're a man and you're looking at a woman and you like her, it's almost in your head you have this plan, as soon as you're married, I'm going to lose her. I'm going to lose her. Kids are going to take her away. She's going to cheat on me with a pool boy. Where is this coming from? And I'd love to hear both of your opinions on that because one's science, but another one is also experience and practice.
Where is the fear that men have coming from?
Yeah, this fear that as soon as you get married, your life is over.
Okay. All right. I have my thoughts, but you do yours first.
People don't trust each other anymore. People don't trust each other anymore, and they don't even know what the experience is to build a real, authentic, loving relationship. My wife and I, people often don't know this, but my wife and I got married when I was 23. I was 23, and she was 19, 4-year difference. And I remember, her college professors telling her, you are ruining your life by getting married so young. I remember our friends, why are you guys getting married so young? You guys have 10, 15, 20 years. Why are you getting married so young? Why are you in a rush? And since then, since we've been married, we've been together 15 years now, and we have 5 kids, and she is so happy. But people still come up to her and say, why did you get married so young? Didn't you ruin your life? And these women are crushingly depressed. They have all these horrible breakups of sexual traumas from male partners, and they're just crushingly miserable. They're like, didn't you ruin your life by getting married young? It's insane that people can say that, and she's so truly happy. We both are as a couple. People don't understand that, so they don't even have a frame of reference to look at a happy couple and say, wow, I wonder what they're doing there. Instead, they go back to this lie of you should spend 15, 20 years on hedonism.
What do you think, Alex?
I interviewed theologian and professor Nancy Piercy on my podcast, and she's done a lot of research into this idea that 50% of marriages end in divorce. What she discovered was the people who are getting divorced are not Christians. And you say, well, no, 50% of marriages, Christian and non-Christian, are getting divorced. Not true. What she discovers when you really break down the data, it's not true Christians who are getting divorced. It's nominal Christians. So these are people that go to church on Easter and Christmas only. They have no real walk with Christ. They're probably not truly saved. They're not. They think that they're Christians. Most of the country says that they're Christians, but they're not actually. So when they're filling out these forms, they're saying they're checking the box of, sure, I'm a Christian, but they're not. It's just in name only. True Christians are not getting divorced. And so one thing is, I think it was a huge problem personally that the church, we became okay with no-fault divorce. That was really the beginning. People want to blame, I know that conservatives want to blame the legalization of gay marriage for this destruction in marriage and what we've been seeing in the last few years. I actually think it started with divorce. But true Christians, you're getting married knowing divorce is not an option. So I think that's the big thing is I I think that marriage really should be for Christian couples only. And that's like a super hot take, but that's
what should everybody else do?
I don't think they should get married. They shouldn't have a bibiblical marriage.
Interesting.
It shouldn't be seen as true marriage.
Would that be you can have legal differences?
There might be legal differences. I mean, I think like you could just say that you have like a partner that you're living with or whatever,
like
something like that.
Law.
Yeah, common law. But true marriage defined by God, I think should really only be reserved for Christians. But anyway, I think that there would be all this fear that men have about like, well, maybe she's going to divorce me. Maybe she's going to leave me. She's going to find somebody better. If you're marrying a true Christian woman, those men aren't going into those marriages with those fears.
Where does a man find a true Christian woman?
Church. It's literally that simple. Nobody wants to hear that. They want me to say some special app. They want me to say, this one bar. No, it's literally church. But this is the key.
Okay.
It's not just any church, because we have a church crisis in America. So this is another tangent, I know, but we have a church crisis in America. So the problem is that people are wanting to date and they want to find a real Christian, but you're not going to a real Christian church. You're not going to a real Christian church.
What denomination are you?
I would say Reformed. I would say the closest thing to describe me would be like Reformed Baptist.
Okay.
I think if I was like choosing, but I would say it's more non-denominational, but it's kind of Reformed theology.
So non-denominational is interesting because it is very accepting. Like
right,
you don't
but
have
this
to.
is the problem. You got to avoid the seeker sensitive churches that are like, yeah, we don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We don't want to call out any sin. Those are the places you're not being fed spiritually. You're not going to find a real Christian woman. You're not going to find a real Christian man. So I think you have to find the right church first. And most of the time, my pastor knows this. Most of the time you tell your pastor, hey, I am really interested in finding somebody to marry. They're looking out for you. They get to know you and they know the church and they're like, okay, we're going to find you a husband or we're going to find you a wife. They want to work with you on that. They want you to get married. So I think that's an important thing too, is to find a church where you have a pastor that actually wants to build a relationship with the congregation. You know how many churches I've been to in the last 10 years? The pastor doesn't even know who is, these huge mega churches, they don't have a personal relationship with you. They don't know you at all. It's this watered down, we're going to watch a movie as a sermon. We're going to hand out pop and popcorn. That's what they're doing. That's not church. If that is the church you're going to run, you're not going to find a spouse there.
I'm Russian Orthodox. Like our services are completely different.
Yeah.
Adam's been to a couple of them.
It was 2.5 hours the other day standing on marble on bare feet. So
right.
Very different. Very, very different. No, we need to be making deeper connections so that we can find people who have aligned values with us. That's one key element of finding a good partner. Back in 1995, the research shows that 65% of couples got together through family and friend connections, those communities, and then additionally through churches, through other organizations. It was this massive, at least 80% of people connected through their communities in some way, or the relationships they had. And then it was about 12% of people connected through some sort of dating system or a dating network back then. We didn't fully have computer dating the way that we do now. The research shows that has flipped. Now it's 12% combined through family and friends, with 65% of people now connecting through dating apps. That's a huge reversal in only 30 years? And that's why people are not finding happy people that are compatible, because you are going alone into the wilderness, hoping you will find a stranger, as if you're selecting something off of Amazon. And then you hope that when it arrives, it's what you're looking for. It's not. You send it back. You try to get another one. You do that 500 times. And then, yes, you run out of time. You run out of eggs, whatever it may be. Yes, absolutely. Connecting through your networks, connecting maybe through your religious institutions, connecting through family and friends, people with shared values. What's cool about that is you get 20 years of data on those people. So you know them, or the people you care about know them, and they can bring you the right person.
Well, there's also more to it, right? So when you say you run out of time, you don't run out of time. You run out of hope. Right? This is actually the transaction that happens is based on hope. And we had a great podcast about that with Adam a little bit earlier. And the core essence of this is that in a relationship which is broken, the anxious and the avoidance cycle, often men are avoidant. I tend to be more on that side. He diagnosed me on a podcast. But if you're more avoidant, then you simply don't believe that the thing you want is possible. Or even if you do, it's so far away. It's like tucked so far behind these like piles and piles and piles of armor that you've built up that you just try to preserve that hope to the very last end. that eventually you just kind of live without it. And when you do meet somebody and you meet a woman who is able to spark that hope in you, that connection starts fostering. But that also means that A, the woman must preserve it herself. And we're talking about is by going to a believing church or believing community. You know, I like to extrapolate the church component, although I'm very Christian, I agree with that strongly. But for the sake of everybody else who may not be or is going on that path, let's even take the church out of it. You have to have a community which fosters hope, which fosters belief, which gives you something that you say, things are going to be okay, and I can choose to trust and to have faith. So a woman who has faith can spark that in a man. I don't think a man can spark that on his own.
I also think that there are a lot of men and women who do not feel that spark with the opposite sex because they are sexually numb from SSRIs.
That's pretty awful. Yes.
That is a massive problem that no one wants to talk about, that within a week of being on SSRIs, less than 2 weeks of being on SSRIs, you could start experiencing genital numbness, no interest in the opposite sex, and this is the scariest part. It never goes away. We are seeing a huge amount of people that are coming forward saying, being on SSRIs for a short amount of time in high school, in college, has left me with a completely numb sex life for the rest of my life, and they have to live with it. It's a whole syndrome that is barely being discussed. Well, it's not being discussed by doctors when they're prescribing it. Nobody is telling people, you know, that there is a risk of you never being able to enjoy sex if you take this pill, even temporarily. No one's telling them. And you have now 7-year-olds who they have agreed can start taking Lexapro. 7 years old taking Lexapro. Now imagine the relationship issues that people who are on antidepressants from 7 years old are going to experience in Generation A.
Now, for the people at home, you may not realize this, but the research shows that about 25% of American women are taking medications for psychological issues. A lot of women are prescribed SSRIs, even just for basic biological things, for their periods, for stuff like that. So this is a gigantic issue that a tremendous number of people are facing, way more than we can even imagine.
Well, we're putting girls on birth control at 14, 15 years old. Was one of the main side effects of birth control. Your risk of depression doubles. Your risk of suicide triples. And the antidote for that is not to get off the birth control pill, which it is to prescribe you Lexapro or another SSRI to deal with that problem. You are medicalizing an entire generation, and we've never seen more mental health issues. We've never seen more physical issues, chronic disease, the food, the pills, all of this. It's very demonic. It's demonic culture, to be honest with you.
And it's also getting sourced in many ways out of two things. One, the complete destruction of the family, of the traditional family. The reason you are depressed as a kid, in my firm belief, is not that something magically went wrong in your brain. You were fine up till 6. All of a sudden, boom, like the depressive spiral starts. No, it's usually because there is some break of attachment and you simply cannot cope. And yes, there can be kind of a tolerance period and then a tip over, but that is the cause. And then also, it is this inability to help teach kids how to regulate themselves, this inability for them to come in and understand that it's okay to be uncomfortable and you can get over it, that not everything needs to be immediately fixed, that these negative emotions are just a part of life that you just need to learn how to manage at a small scale so you can learn them later on, how to manage them at a bigger scale. Not give a pill, not give like an immediate, here's a gift, here's a video game, here is, whatever, sugar just to spike yourself out of it. It's like, no, let's learn, how to keep our families functional as systems that protect us, but also as systems that grow us into adults that can be responsible without having to run to pills, without having to run to sex, to drugs in order to fix the problems.
Well, and all of this weaves together. In my clinical experience working with kids, working with families, they would start off with attachment issues early on in childhood because their parents didn't know how to give them that love and that nurturing. So then as they grow up nervous and anxious, they develop generalized anxiety disorder. And then it sort of goes under the surface. People say, wow, you're really dedicated to your schoolwork. You're a perfectionist. You're really driven. You're pretty closed off. But then once they hit 12, anywhere from 12 to 16, and they get into those teenage depressive years where it's just totally normal for an entire species. Your teenagers just become suicidally depressed. Completely normal. So at that point, you crash because you no longer have hope that you're ever going to escape from that fear. And bad things keep happening. And as the teenage depression rolls on, you become even more anxious because bad things keep happening. Now you're trying to build romantic relationships, trying to have sexual relationships. That's getting way more complicated and way more terrifying. So your attachment issues get even worse. And it just rolls into your 20s. It rolls into your 30s. Yes, we're putting people on antidepressants. Yes, we're putting them on birth control. We're putting them on anti-anxiety. Then we're throwing them in front of dopamine machines with your phone constantly in your face all the time. And we aren't helping them regulate themselves. It's a gigantic spiral that begins at birth.
There's even worse. So this is something that most doctors do not tell you about when they give you psych meds, SSRIs, benzodiazepines, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications. They all have a withdrawal effect.
Yes.
So if you stop, and I know this very personally because my ex-wife was on SSRIs and a lot of other stuff from very early in her teenage years. My ex-father-in-law, Jordan Peterson, had a huge issue with benzodiazepine dependency, and the withdrawals that happened to him were just terrible. I was there for 2 years that it took us to help him overcome that. And I got to see that very intimately, and I've been having hundreds of stories pour into me ever since that happened, exactly the same. What happens is that not only do these drugs cause a terrible dependency, but when you remove them, the psychological damage that happens, the inability to even contemplate a reality where a life that's different is possible, destroys you inside and outside and in every aspect. And you are left hopeless, broken, and dead. And it's very difficult to give somebody who's dead and given up on themselves hope in life again. That is basically practically impossible.
I spoke to a clinical psychologist who's very passionate on this issue, Dr. Roger McFillin, on the spillover. And he talked about that withdrawal effect with SSRIs, that when people try to get off SSRIs, they start experiencing these symptoms and they think my depression is back. In fact, that is what their regular doctor will tell them. Oh, all of these extra suicidal thoughts, that's the depression coming back. See, that's proof you have depression. You have to be on the pill. That is the withdrawal. You're addicted to the pill. You're addicted to this medication, and you have to get over this, and you have to have the right team around you to get off of it.
Not necessarily addicted,
right,
but
right.
dependent.
That's right.
And that's a big distinction, because
Yes.
an addiction is a different cycle. They're actually pleasure-seeking. For them, they're dependent to the point they simply cannot exist
Yes,
without
that's
it.
correct. You're right. Yeah. So they're dependent on this pill, can't get off. They think it's the depression, when in reality, it's just the withdrawal symptoms that you're experiencing. And you're both talking about this phenomena of children who are not able to regulate emotions. This is why I'm so outspokenly against this gentle parenting phenomenon that so many of my mom friends are obsessed with. This is the weirdest thing that millennials are obsessed with. It's when your child is having a meltdown and throwing a tantrum, is saying to them, every feeling that you feel is valid. Let it all out. Let's talk about it. Why are you feeling this like this? Bring it up for hours and hours. And remember when you were sad today? Let's talk about why we felt sad today. It makes me want to throw up. This is going on instead of what we grew up with, which is telling you, guess what? That's life. We're going to get over it. We're going to move on. Now we're going to go to our t-ball practice. We're going to go to dance practice. We're going to distract ourselves. We have family dinner now. We're moving on. We're getting our mind off of the situation instead of hyper-focusing on your emotions. And what I found was interesting in this interview I did with clinical psychologist Dr. Roger McFillin is that Dr. McFillin talked about when you look at schools who have this hyper-focus on mental health, they have all these mental health programs and classes, and it's like a huge topic of discussion. The kids actually get worse.
Yeah.
They get worse. Their mental health symptoms worsen. They do terrible. As opposed to the kids who don't have these mental health programs, you're not constantly talking about it, you're not constantly hyper-focused on it, they're able to move on and get better because that is how human beings operate.
Think about it this way. In a day, you can think, let's say 100,000 thoughts, If 50 to 60% of them are anxious, scared, or concerned about yourself, you are literally building the neurology that is going to create that reality the next day, and the next day, and the next day. So the more you tell kids they need to be afraid and they need to be concerned, the more they're going to become that. Adam, what do? You have 5 kids. What do you do when they have tantrums like that?
I take a blended approach, actually, for my kids. So we do talk about the reality of what they're feeling, but it's get up, let's go do something. Let's talk it through while we throw a ball back and forth. Let's talk about what we're going to do about it. It's very solution-focused. It's very forward-thinking. Yeah, you have a feeling. Cool. Where does it fit in your life? Is it real? And then what are we going to do about it? Let's resolve it.
I love that. Is it real?
Yeah, I usually just tickle Ellie until she's, my daughter's 6.5. So I usually will tickle her and like distract her and chase her, ever chase me. By the time we're done, like in 90% of the cases, the problem is gone. And I don't mean like we need to talk. It's gone. And I ask, I tried a couple of times. Like, so what do you think why do you think that happened? What do you think happened? And she goes, I don't care. I'm done. And we move on. We don't even have to talk about it because in the majority of the cases of conflict, this happens with relationships all the time, the cause is not that there's anything wrong. It's simply we just temporarily lost the ability to regulate ourselves. You do not need much to regulate yourself as a human being. You need a little bit of positivity, a little bit of hope, a little bit of oxytocin, a little serotonin, and that's it. But we'll start with that as a society. That's actually bad. A lot of it is also hypersexualized. As a man, how many hugs do you get as a man, Adam?
Hugs?
Hugs. You know what that is?
Now that I have kids and a wife,
Yeah,
it's
probably
quite
a lot
but-
with kids.
Well, I have so many men come into my mentorship program or into any of my DMs, and they say, Adam, you posted about hugs, you posted about love and physical affection, and they say, it's been 5 years. It's been 5 years since I had
It's
a hug.
in my last hug. 5 years.
5 years.
32 days
Imagine
and
some
6
dude's
hours.
Like, he's got a watch on that's like 5 years since my last hug. It's counting up. Like, yeah, 5 years for some of them. It's been since they had a hug. Most men only experience physical affection or physical touch through sex. That's one reason they're so obsessed.
So I got a question for you. Do you believe in sex before marriage?
No.
Really? So no sex or sex before marriage?
No sex before marriage.
No sex before marriage. How does that work for you?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. It is it's a huge hurt in my life, singleness at this age. But I also think that having that standard has pushed out a lot of the wrong men. So maybe it's been like a safety net for me that it's you know what, those guys clearly were not meant to be with you. But yes, has that caused guys to walk away and say like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do this relationship? 100%. 100%.
So
but I see that as a blessing. Like, okay, thank you, God, for ending this sooner rather than later. And then I've definitely had multiple long-term relationships, and obviously those guys were okay with it.
And for majority of men, if the only way they can connect with you is through sex, is through that physical intimacy, they're basically stuck feeling starved of the only thing that can calm them down, which is that oxytocin serotonin mix. And this is a huge issue in society. So in many ways, we don't really bring up our kids, our boys, in a way that they can properly experience serotonin and oxytocin to calm themselves down. And then if they are looking for a healthy relationship, and I do believe that's very healthy and that's actually good for everybody involved, then they are kind of playing into their weakness. They don't know how to do this. We don't equip them properly. Adam, is that what you're seeing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the guys, they're trained on porn from 10, 12 years old.
It's terrible.
This is what women will want. This is what women will do. And
it's one of my favorite dating questions is to ask a guy, how old were you the first time that you watched porn?
Oh, it's horrific.
I always ask this question, and every time I am just as horrified. And the average age I get told is 7 or 8.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
7?
Yep.
7 years old.
7 or 8.
That's insane.
And I anticipate, I don't know if you're seeing this or noticing this, I'm anticipating that age is going to get younger and younger because of how fast we're putting technology in children's hands now.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Adam, how old were you the first time you saw porn?
I remember when the neighbor kids, I went over for a sleepover and they said, hey, watch this. And they showed it. I was about 11 years old.
Wow.
I was a little bit older than most men. 11, I went, what? No. And that was
Ew.
it. Yeah, it was. No, I recall. And it's one boy showing it to another, one kid showing it to another, kids at school showing it to each other. Parents don't even think about that. But the other kids at school, you're taking them into this school program for all these random strangers. And the other kids have phones. Your kid doesn't have a phone. Well, guess what? They're going to get shown this stuff. But a lot of guys, they get trained up on that. And so they just dream of the day, when will I have access to a woman to do these things with? And then they try to get into a relationship, and that's the first thing that they think of. And that's the only kind of affection or intimacy that they understand. It's horrible.
It's pretty dark because also it takes away the only thing that helps you build that connection. Because if you do not have sex, if you do not have these bonding experiences where you can have proper hormonal balance
Right,
and
but
proper
this is the
relationships.
problem, because as a culture, we have trained a culture to think that you have to date for a year, 2 years or longer before getting married. See, this is where this whole warped idea comes in. We were never supposed to wait that long to get married. That's why like it was easier to wait to have sex before your marriage, because you were engaged for a couple months, 6 months tops, and then you're getting married so you can have sex. But yeah, if you're dating for 7 years,
That's ridiculous.
You're going to be having sex. It's impossible. The most frustrating, number one way that I can tell that a woman is an idiot is if she tells me she's been in a relationship for more than several years and she's not engaged. That is the biggest red flag right there. How is this happening?
I have so many women come to me at 7 years or 8 years and say, Adam, I'm afraid my relationship isn't going anywhere. And
Really?
I say, so many. And I say, I think you're right. And I say, tell me about you and your boyfriend. Well, you know, we sort of have talked about it, but, you know, I don't want to pressure him too much.
Yeah, but here's
like,
the thing.
Well, hold on. It's 7 years. 7 years. I don't want to pressure him too much. Well, okay. Have you ever talked about it? Well, we almost did in year 5. And he started looking at other girls on Instagram. So I realized I shouldn't do that. So I'm going to wait. Anxious attachment in the woman. She's approval seeking. She doesn't believe she's worth it. She doesn't know how to have those conversations. And then avoidant attachment in the man. To your point earlier, they were running away from commitment. Terrified of commitment. He's trying to string her along. His plan is to string her along as possible and maintain good feelings, hopefully indefinitely. And if that doesn't work, well, he can find somebody else later.
Keep in mind, this is an anomaly by global standards. In most other cultures, you go like anywhere on the map that's not Western Europe or North America, people are getting married 20, 18, 20, 24. Their engagements last 6 months. They have kids within the first year of marriage. This is just such a wild and bizarre world.
Why is it almost exclusively an American problem? This waiting till you're in your mid to late 30s to finally get married.
Frankly, a lie that you need careers in order to be successful, in order to be able to support a family. The fact that everything is just so damn expensive. Like, buy a house. How long will it take you to buy a house? And also the standard that was set, that in order for you to have children, you must have a house, a
3-car
car,
garage, yeah.
That's right, a boat, this, like that's all lies, right? My parents had me when they were living in Moscow State University, like in a room like half the size of the studio with 3 other people. I grew up somewhat broken, but okay. So, we're still here. And in the majority of the world, they live in even worse conditions. They're able to have kids and make these relationships, not because they have a list of things that your media has told you that you need to have in order to have kids. What you need to have kids is the ability to raise them by being present.
Can I say something that might be a little bit unpopular? I almost wonder if this obsession in America to have more, have everything bigger homes. Every kid has their own room. Every kid needs their own space. This obsession with teenagers have to have their own space. Maybe we've created too much space. And so you're giving your teenagers areas to go away from you instead of fostering this community and this atmosphere in your home to want to be together. We're giving kids every avenue to separate from their parents earlier and earlier, putting devices in their rooms, making sure the rooms are super far away from the family communal areas. I think all of this sounds bizarre, but just the way we are building homes, I think is not conducive to
Alex,
a family.
I disagree. You're taking your kids and you're kicking them out of your room. Right? Your kid wants to be next to you for as long as they can be. So I'll give you an example. For a number of years, it was just me and my daughter at home, right? And she would come and she would try to sleep in my bed. She'd try to hang out with me. She'd bring me in her room. She was always trying to be next to me. If I was doing laundry, if I was doing, kid stuff in the kitchen, she always wanted to be next to me. She had a lot of toys. She had friends. No, she wanted to be next to us. We actually take kids in the modern world and we kick them out. We say, no, you must be in your room playing, sleeping. You must be at practice. You must be at daycare. It's like, that's such nonsense. No other culture does this.
Yes.
Their kids are brought up in their presence until about the age of 7
and
at
the
least.
mothers are wearing the children to do every activity.
here you don't even breastfeed. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Breastfeeding and daycare are two of the biggest pieces for attachment problems. Daycare is one of the biggest destroyers of attachment here in America because you have a baby, and 4 weeks later, 6 weeks later, you dump them off with a stranger.
Yeah, it's like, here you go.
And now a stranger's going to raise your baby. And we forget that babies, one of their strongest sense is the sense of smell. They can smell when that caregiver's not part of them. They can smell when it's not mom. Babies cry. What do? They cry inconsolably, or they freeze because now they're around strangers and can't hear or smell mom anymore. So now you have a kid being raised by strangers, then they adapt to the strangers. Then you change the strangers every couple of months because it's going to be a new daycare that you're going to go to.
Well, and that's the thing. The turnover rates in daycare centers are so let's just say I have no choice. I think there are choices. I think that I would rather share one nanny with 4 other families in my neighborhood than put my kid in a daycare center, but maybe that's just me. Anyway, the turnover rates in these daycare centers are so astronomical. Your child is attaching to so many different people in such a short amount of time. You don't think that's going to create chaos? You don't think that's going to create problems? And one of the darkest, most depressing areas of the internet, find any viral TikTok or reel of a mother talking about crying, dropping her child off at daycare. You will see thousands of comments of mothers encouraging her to create attachment issues with her child. Don't worry, it will get easier. It always hurts, but you just learn to get over it. You learn how to ignore the feelings. You learn how to ignore the guilt. That is not normal. People think that because we do things often enough in American culture that it's normal. It's not. It's evil.
So I love that point, and I cannot stress it enough. People say, well, look, you're going to drop off your kid at daycare and they're going to develop attachment issues. You are building yourself attachment issues. Let's walk through this process. Let's say that just by sheer luck, you met somebody you could bond with. By sheer luck, you went through this just piles of horrible dating advice, like made horrible mistakes. Chances are probably slept with them before you got married and, whatever happened. By sheer luck, you had a kid. And you're loving that kid. And then you take this one thing that you spend 20, 30 years working yourself towards, and you tear it away, put it down, and tell yourself that now life will be forever lonely. And then you try to do that again. Can you imagine the psychological damage you experience subconsciously, not by doing it once, but doing it over and over again, and then telling yourself, this is normal, and then doing the same thing to your partner. What's more, men don't realize they're actually susceptible to the same thing. So when a man picks up a newborn, the sense of smell triggers just a huge flood of oxytocin and serotonin. I've never experienced anything like that because I guess that's how we bond.
See, that's what I thought. But did you guys see what Bradley Cooper said recently? Bradley Cooper said that when his daughter was first born, he did not love her for 8 months. He said for 8 months, he was like, not only do I not love this child, if somebody walked in this house for a gun, I'm not sure that I'm willing to give my life up for this child. He said it took 8 months to love his daughter. So I asked this question on YouTube. I said, I need the men to weigh in. Is this normal that it takes men a really long time to attach to their newborn, or that was really abnormal?
No, there's two different things at play there. One is men have to be able to get oxytocin bonding to be able to connect with their child, and a lot of guys don't. High cortisol will block oxytocin bonding. Avoidant attachment will block oxytocin bonding. So they may not feel affection for their child in that way, and they may not feel that affection surge. But at 8 months, what's fascinating there is men bond through a different hormone called vasopressin. And vasopressin releases when you overcome stress, when you teach. A lot of men bond to their children best through teaching.
You're a project.
Yeah. Well, I remember as an early father, my first child, I loved my son when he was born, but I didn't feel as close to him as his mom did. She'd hold him and say, smell him. And I'd be like, what? It was weird.
Smells
right?
like
She
pee.
would rub the baby on me and be like, go away. But once he learned that, and he could hold a spoon, once he could kind of make noises, he'd try to walk. As I started teaching him, I found that I started bonding incredibly to him. Then I started studying male bonding in more depth. And we learn, we bond through teaching, through mentoring, through guiding, through solving challenges. That is how men are meant to bond. So when we teach our children, we bond to them. But if you don't have healthy attachment, you won't even feel affection toward them. You won't even feel much of anything at them. You'll feel an emptiness that you don't like.
So there's a caveat here. So we actually did a home birth. And I think that also might be a big difference. I believe that hospital birth for healthy pregnancies are actually much higher risk than people understand, because you are locked in a room where you're on a timer and with a giant bill, which is an American thing, which is insane, with people running around with sharp instruments, weird chemicals, freaking everybody out, and you're supposed to be enjoying this deep experience. Like, no, like for us, we had Ellie at home. You know, everything was comfortable. Everything went great. She came out. You know, I got my first hug. Everything was safe. And that, I think, brought down all of those like cortisol hormones, whatever the hell stress hormones they were, so I could actually have that experience.
Fully obsessed with it. Fully agree. It would be my worst nightmare to have a hospital birth. And obviously there are things that sometimes you can't control,
Sure.
but if at all possible, I can make a home birth happen, I'm making a home birth happen.
100% agree with that. 100%, because the experience will be so fulfilling. It is one of the best experiences in your life. Do not ruin it, man. Do not ruin it. So, anyways, what do you think about that? Is there a science behind this, or is it just preference?
I do know that attachment begins at birth. When the baby is born, the baby comes out, right? All of my kids, immediate skin-to-skin contact on mom within seconds of being born. They're born, they wipe them real quick, they throw them on mom. And they are on mom for the first 2 years of their life.
Yep.
I forget what she looks like on the front of her, because there's just a kid like climbing all up and down her. For about 2 years, they're just a monkey that just hangs onto her body. And after about 2 years, then they start exploring the house a little bit more, and they start growing. And that's how humans are meant. You look at any, regardless of what people may think of evolution, but you look at any of our closest relatives that are like us, any of the chimps, any of the apes, and they're the same. They just cling. They hold on. It's like you got a tumor attached to the front of you. It's not normal to then take that tumor, toss it away, and then go 30 miles that way to go work for a corporation, and then come home too exhausted to play with that baby. And then you just look at them like, oh, I have to work to feed you. And you come home with stress and misery and struggle. And then where does the family bonding go? You're slaves. You are slaves in the worst possible situation. No wonder we grow up with attachment issues.
And you started by being flown around New York City in a helicopter, and then you ended up basically as being like this baby servant, and you know that those things are going to grow up and hate you. And that is your life, because America. Like, that is not a good story, guys. So let me ask you this, and you both are content creators, you both have large audiences. How do we turn the narrative on this? How do we re-educate society that A, there's a different way, but also B, what are the steps to take, and most importantly, the steps to avoid? What do you guys think?
Do you want to go first or go last?
I'm trying to think.
Not to put you on the spot, Adam.
Sure.
Work with Veritas.
We need to ask ourselves, are we happy? What would happiness mean to me? What would meaning and purpose be in my life? And why am I not seeking that, right? There's hard circumstances in life where people don't have a choice. But we have so many choices in the West, and so many of us are not pursuing those choices or even examining those choices. We're living in accordance with fear. We're living in accordance with just what we were born into. We're living in accordance with just holding on while the roller coaster goes faster and faster and faster. We don't pull the lever, and we don't stop, and we don't think, is this what I want? When we do that, all of a sudden we gain this power to make different choices. And then those different choices can lead us to actual fulfillment, actual pleasure and joy in life. That's what I did when I had my 5 children. That was pulling the lever and saying, this is the direction I want my life to go.
Adam, most people don't even know the lever exists.
I know.
You're talking pulling the lever. There's so much choice that everybody's supposed to hear. They're supposed to choose everything about everything. And that is probably the biggest barrier to making any choice. You don't even know that there is a possibility where things don't have to happen, where you don't have to have certain conversations, where abortion or divorce is not even possible, where, you know, things like betrayals, things like these horrible, like, say, frankly, I don't like gender ideology. I do not like gender ideology in kids, where you can say that's not possible.
Most people don't. Regardless of where you fall politically, most people agree on that
point. And yet
point.
Nobody can come out and say this.
I saw the most horrifying article today. A journalist looked into the gender ideology medical complex. And the new thing now that they're pivoting to is capitalizing on the non-binary descriptor that so many kids are claiming. And so instead of transforming your genitals into one genital, instead of changing one genital into another, what they're opting for now is complete castration. So there's no part at all, so that you look basically like a Barbie doll.
Just add a USB slot. Yes. Make it easier on yourself.
But they're taking away everything. They're sewing you up if you're a girl, and they're just getting rid of everything if you're a boy. And this is for these kids that now claim to be non-binary. They are recommending the surgery to minors. So yeah, this is something that there is, if you are sane, that's all we're asking for. You're talking about, so what is your mission? What are you hoping? I just want to appeal to sane people. I want to appeal to sane people. Most of us can hear that, can see so many of these different things that we do in our culture, like Adam said, and say, this isn't working. And my mission is to speak specifically and primarily to young women and say, we were told a lie. And this is really hard to swallow, because when you admit this and you realize this, a lot of things in your worldview fall apart. But we were told growing up as women that we can have it all, we can do it all. The truth is, we can have it all, but not at the same time. And when we try to do it all as women at the same time, we are spread too thin. We are so incredibly stressed, unhappy. Biologically, we were not made physically to be carrying this high of a stress load between work and taking care of a household and raising kids. We were not meant to do it all. And this is really weird. Some of you, you'll be like, oh yeah, she knows what she's talking about. To some of you who've never heard this, you're gonna say this lady is nuts. But our period, literally our menstrual cycle as women, proves that that is correct. The fact that it takes us 28 days to start over in our hormonal cycle compared to a man, which is 24 hours, tells you that we operate different, we handle stress differently. That's why some days of the month, we really cannot handle stress. We're really creative. We're way more patient with our children, patient in our relationships. And then you have days where it's like, if I hear one more thing, I'm not going to be able to drink it. We were not designed to operate at this same level as men. So basic facts that, like, there are two genders right there, acknowledging that universal truth that everyone should be able to acknowledge. It's insane that this is something we have to be like, do you acknowledge that there are two genders or not? If you acknowledge just that, honestly, most of the ills and the problems that we experience as a culture would be solved.
People have to learn to take a stance on actually something for a change, as opposed to always accepting that somebody else's opinion can be valid. It doesn't matter. You can be wrong. You can live your life in a way that somebody else finds completely wrong, and you can get over that. And you don't have to fight them. You don't have to argue. You can just say, cool, you live your life your way. I live my life my way. That's what America was supposed to be founded on. And yet somehow we now got into this weird stage where everybody has to agree on everything. It's like a dysfunctional family.
No, here's the thing. We will see in 20 years who was right. The parents that, turn their kids into genderless eunuchs or whatever, we'll have those people versus the others, and then we will see how they turned out. Now, I have my own predictions on that, but the truth will come out.
As it always does.
Right.
That's basically the way history works, because we're playing with evolution. Now we're evolving new ideas and new mindsets, and our evolution, sure, we've, shed fur and tails, some less than others, but basically we're trying to now create a new way where we're getting to the truth of what relationships are, what families are. We're trying to understand this deeper meaning of our psyche. It is just our next frontier of evolution. And we're testing. There were Neanderthals who went off entirely off the humanity genetics, and then they tested another entity as a concept. They died off.
I mean, the fact that you have women who are very, very career driven, end up getting married, having a family, and over half, the majority of women will quit altogether because they want to stay home or they want to go down to part-time. Mm-hmm. That tells you right there, something isn't right. Why are we not? Here's my biggest problem. Why are we not talking to girls about this in high school? Before you ever choose college, before you ever choose a career, we should be talking about the fact that odds are, statistically, you will want to stay home. Now, if you knew that as a girl, if you weren't told that, follow your dreams, do all this, have a family whenever you want, it doesn't even matter, that's not your priority. If we were to be honest with girls about that at a very young age, wouldn't the way that we choose our career, that we go about our life, that we plan our life look differently?
Yeah, but then you wouldn't have as many colleges because you wouldn't need as many colleges.
Because everything is a business. Because women in America are a commodity.
Everybody in America is a commodity.
We are a product, and this should be the most, if you are a feminist, this should be the most radical feminist take, is stop allowing yourself as a woman to be a product to be bought and sold by the fertility industry, by big pharma, by corporate America. We are a product. We're not seen as people anymore.
I actually agree with this. People don't realize that they are being sold lies continuously. And I don't even know that it's malicious. I think it's just stupid. People don't have people at home teaching them things. Parents aren't teaching their kids, look, you won't be happy if you do this, this, and this. Try these things first. Try some of these things that could make you happy. I think because we don't even have generations in the past that have been happy. It's been maybe 80 to 100 years since people were happy in America. Now we have trauma. Now we have fear. Now we have trying desperately to try to figure out what we're supposed to do. I think we're all looking for the next answer forward, and I think we need to talk about it as people.
Also because there's a question of morality, right? So most of these things should not be a business because it is considered to be immoral, right?
Well, other countries are horrified the fact that we have ads for pharmaceutical drugs on TV.
Yeah.
They cannot believe America does that when they find out.
So I'll give you an example. In most of Eastern Europe, giving somebody benzodiazepines for more than 10 days straight is a punishable crime. You will go to jail because you are causing such damage to somebody. And here, it is on like street corners, right? So there's a number of industries that are not tied to a universal statement of morality. And because of that, what isn't a business? Porn is a business, drugs are a business, abortion is a business. A lot of these other areas are very harsh businesses. And until there is some understanding of what is good and bad, where will you guys even start agreeing? So how does one person agree with another person on what should be good and bad? What do you guys think on that, Stan?
I'm not sure that we will ever agree. And so because of that, it's more important than ever to be confident in that what you believe is true and that you just might have to get comfortable being uncomfortable standing alone. Your family might be the only family in your community that lives life like you. You might be the only homeschooling family. You might be the only family that's not eating fast food and processed food. You might be the only family that regularly goes to church. That's okay. It's okay to raise kids, in my opinion, that are guaranteed to not be normal, because I will be damned if what normal is, if I am supposed to raise kids to be today's standard of normal, then I have failed. I will have failed as a future parent.
Adam, are you raising your kids to be normal?
I am raising my kids to love each other, to talk through challenges, to, if they have disputes or differences, at least find some common ground and be able to move forward. So no, I am not raising my kids to do anything that's normal here in America.
But it's normal. But it's normal in a lot of other places. And I'm very curious to see what happens, because I can tell you, like, so many people are talking about leaving. So many people are saying, I'm going to go anywhere. Anywhere that isn't going to be pushing this type of lifestyle on my children. I'm kind of in the same position. Like, I'm not committed to staying in the U.S. my whole life because, like, frankly, I'm not convinced you guys are going to be around. No offense.
That's juicy.
Yeah. Sure, there's a good opportunity here, but society's either going up or down, and like you guys are kind of, still figuring that out.
I will say this, and this is kind of funny coming from somebody who can't stand winter, and I live in hot desert climate, Arizona, and I love it here. I thrive here. I'm totally a lizard. But I am obsessed with the Scandinavian parenting culture. I love what they do over there. There's a huge focus on outside time.
Yep.
You know, the kids even napping outdoors. Your kid is sitting in their carriage while you're eating lunch or whatever, making sure they have that fresh air. They sleep better. They have less allergies. Just all of it, I'm obsessed with. I think some of what they're doing over there is right.
They tend to be a lot more resilient, I find, to just in general stressors. Their culture is very stoic. I really like the Scandinavian culture. They're very stoic. They have to be stoic because of the climate, because of even the history. And the biggest thing is they're very non-confrontational. They're very chill. They're very kind of like, reserved. And that resolves a lot of problems because they just don't fight. Unless they fight, and then they're not. But
people do not expect that of me because I have a big mouth, and I am a podcast host or whatever. So you would just be like, oh, she like loves getting into it with people. I'm actually extremely not confrontational.
You just calm at home. Like, what are you at home? What is Alex like at home?
Very quiet.
Really?
Because what's interesting about this career is I have to be on. Like, I mean, this entire time we've been recording, like my personality has to be on, and I'm really like using so much of my extrovertedness so that when I'm done, I'm like, I've used all my words for the day. I'm going to veg out. I'm going to cook. I'm going to just watch TV. I'm going to read, or I'm going to prep for my next day. And there's not a lot of talking excitement. I really don't go out on weeknights because I have work, very quiet life off camera for me.
Fair enough. It's a good balance. Man, we covered a lot of stuff.
I know. And that's what I do.
Podcast.
I love that because that's how my podcast is that every week I'm interviewing a radically different expert or guest that has a fascinating personal story or something to educate my audience and entertain my audience on that will help them heal a sick culture, whether that's spiritually, physically, emotionally. So that's what we're focusing on, the spillover. And every week is basically what we covered in this podcast. It was like a snapshot of all the different topics that I have covered in the last 6 months. So if you enjoyed that, you'll definitely love the spillover.
Where can people find you?
You can subscribe to the spillover anywhere you get your podcasts, and then also Real Alex Clark on YouTube to watch the shows. And I did an amazing interview with Adam also. So you can look forward to that.
Wonderful. Adam, where do we find you?
I am Adam Lane Smith, the attachment specialist. You can find me and all of my products and my mentorship program especially on adamlanesmith.com. I'm also at Adam Lane Smith on Twitter and at Attachment Adam on Instagram.
Awesome. Thanks, Adam. You guys can find me at Andrey Korikov on Instagram, and you can also check out Veritas Creative Media, veritascreative.media, if you guys are interested in what we do in helping raise creators like Adam. Guys, a fantastic podcast. Alex, thank you so much for sharing and being so open and being so cool. Adam, you're awesome as always, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.